Howdy everybody, Dr. Andy Woods here. This is Pastor's Point of View number 354, and this is being released on May the 16th, 2025. We have for you today a prophecy update. As you take a look at our previous slide, in this session we're going to try to cover at least these three things. Got some information for you concerning the temple in Israel, the temple to be built, I should say. The Gog-Magog alignment is tightening as we've never seen before. And then we also will want to make some comments about anti-Semitism, which is galloping all over our world, and show you how all of these things relate to the end time prophetic scenario. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start with the temple, our first bullet point, and let's go to Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27, which is a tremendous verse because it outlines the coming 7-year tribulation period. It says, "And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice." You might want to keep the word sacrifice in mind for a point we're going to make in just a minute. "He will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate." And what a verse of scripture that is. Here's the way we like to portray it in the form of a graphic. It's describing the 7-year tribulation period. It describes how the tribulation period is going to start after the rapture, with a covenant of some kind between the Antichrist and unbelieving Israel. It tells you the length of the tribulation period, 7 years. It tells you what's going to happen at the end of it, the second advent of Jesus, and it tells you what's going to happen right in the middle of it, which is the desecration of Israel's third temple. Obviously, the Antichrist can't desecrate a temple that doesn't exist. So any type of talk within Israel, or maybe outside of Israel, about rebuilding Temple 3, we think is prophetically significant. We think that's a clear sign or a harbinger that the 7-year tribulation period is rapidly approaching. When we talk about temple number 3, you have to look at it in terms of Israel's 4 temples. The Solomonic temple was Israel's first temple, destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. The second temple is called Zerubbabel's temple, built by the returnees from the exile, ultimately destroyed by the Romans. Skipping to the end there, Temple 4 is a temple that will be functioning in the millennium, but the one we're talking about is Temple 3, something that Israel hasn't had for 2,000 years. And yet something that has to be in existence for the Antichrist to desecrate and desolate midway through the tribulation period. And we believe that we are on the precipice of, as one authors said, ready to rebuild. There are constant rumblings within Israel and outside of Israel regarding the construction of temple number 3. That's why I found this particular article from Israel 365 News so interesting. It says, "A Muslim Mahdi Messiah calls for the Arabs to build Jewish temple in Jerusalem and an exodus of Palestinians from Gaza." And this article was written May the 9th, 2025. And here's what it says. I've never seen this angle come into existence related to temple number 3, where it's not just the Jews calling for temple number 3, it's some leading voices within the Islamic world calling for the Jewish temple. Who would have ever thought that could happen? The article says 2 weeks ago, Israel 365 News published an article about an individual whose last name is Hashem, an Egyptian American and the founder of a group called AROPL. Hashem claims to be a living successor of the Prophet Muhammad and Jesus Christ. and his sermons bring a divine message to the global Christian community. He also claims to be the successor of Simon Peter, the successor to Jesus Christ, the true and legitimate Pope. So obviously you're dealing with someone that is making a lot of claims. The issue here is not the legitimacy of his claims. The issue here is, look at all of the people following him that hang on his every word. And his words are calling for, as I'm going to show you, the construction of Temple number 3 in Jerusalem. He claims to be the Mahdi, a messianic figure and redeemer of Islam, who will come as an end of days ruler. After the article was published in Israel 365 News was contacted by a spokesperson for the organization. He released a statement outlining a proposal by Hashem for peace between the Palestinians and Israel based on the Arab world joining with the Jews in the construction of the third temple in Jerusalem. That's kind of interesting. I mean, even when we are dealing with temple number 2, it was the Persian kings that sort of had to add a blessing to allow the Jews to rebuild temple number 2. Could this be the same thing happening in the Middle East? It's a point worth considering. This initiative calls for a joint effort between the Arabs and the Jews to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. It also calls for an exodus of the Palestinians from Gaza and the creation of a new state headed by a descendant and heir to the Prophet Muhammad, which would refer to this individual and his family. So this is kind of a lengthy article, which I won't obviously read the whole thing to you, but as you read through it, it gives his sermon where he refers to the temple in Jerusalem over and over again from a Muslim vantage point. I've never seen a Muslim talk this way. He talks about the temple of Solomon, the son of David, as the temple being built. He says there is no rebuilding of Jerusalem unless it includes that which does not include the rebuilding of its own crown jewel, the temple of Solomon. He calls it a great temple. He says David is our David, their Solomon is our Solomon. We believe in the same prophet's message. Fascinating. And as you go through this, you'll see his perpetual references to the Temple Mount, or the temple. And so, once again, have I ever seen this perspective before? I haven't. It's usually the Jews calling for the rebuilding of Temple 3 and the Muslims hating it. Now you've got a leading voice within Islam calling for the construction of Temple number 3, just like the Persian kings in the days of Ezra had to sort of sign on to the project and issue various decrees in order for Temple number 2 to be rebuilt. Are we living in that same sort of climate? It could be. Only time will tell. But it's interesting, some way, somehow, Temple number 3 has to be rebuilt, standing and functioning midway through the tribulation period. There is a second article I want to draw your attention to from Israel 365 News by the same author, May the 13th, 2025. It says, for the first time in 2,000 years, a lamb was brought to the Temple Mount for a second Passover. Now remember when I was reading Daniel 9:27 and it says the Antichrist will desecrate the temple by putting an end to sacrifice and offering within temple number 3. That indicates that not only do you have to have a rebuilt temple number 3, but you have to have animal sacrifices functioning for the Antichrist to stop. And so it's very interesting that the nation of Israel has such a great interest. People within the nation of Israel have such a great interest not only in the rebuilding of temple number 3, but of bringing sacrificial animals to the Temple Mount. And this is the first time this has happened in 2,000 years. The article says this: several Jews were arrested on Sunday at the gates of the Temple Mount after they managed to bring a lamb onto the mount to sacrifice it for the second Passover. The group that did that is a group called, their Hebrew name is given, but here is the translation of that name, Return to the Mount. The movement reported for the first time in 2,000 years a live goat was brought onto the Temple Mount with the aim of sacrificing it for the second Passover sacrifice. The article goes on and it says this particular movement explained their intentions, and this is a direct quote from them. Quote, "The only way to defeat Hamas, facilitate the release of all of the hostages," and here they're referring to what happened October 7th, 2023, "and entirely uproot and eradicate Arab terrorism is by engaging in intense activity on the Temple Mount and nowhere else." Now watch this sentence in the quote. "Only through full sovereignty on the Temple Mount, the renewal of the sacrifices, and the building of the temple will we triumph." So here's a group very dedicated to, number one, rebuilding temple number 3, number 2, restoring sacrifices in that temple, all of which are necessary for the Antichrist to desecrate the temple midway through the tribulation period. And they say that's the only way we're going to have any type of survival in the Middle East. It's the only way the hostages are going to be released. Hamas is going to be defeated. Terrorism, attacks against the Jews are going to be defeated, etc., etc. So it's just showing a mentality or a mindset concerning how hungry some people are related to rebuilding temple number 3 and sacrifices, to the point where they're bringing a sacrifice onto the Temple Mount where they're willing to be arrested for such. So whether it's without Israel or within Israel, look at these voices calling for the temple number 3 and all of its accoutrements. I think all of these things are very significant prophetically. As one or several Bible teachers have put it, when the discussion of the world moves to Israel, you're dealing with God's hour hand. When the discussion of the world moves to Jerusalem, you're dealing with the minute hand. When the discussion of the world moves to the Temple Mount, which is apparently where things are moving, now we're at God's second hand. And so it shows you how much we are on the precipice of the 7-year tribulation period. Let me take you to a second item, and it has to do with the whole Gog-Magog scenario, which is the stage is constantly being set for this. You'll notice our map. These are the various players that are going to, according to Ezekiel 38 and 39, invade Israel as part of the end time scenario. You see we've got Rosh or Russia circled, Persia or Iran circled, Sheba and Dedan as one of the players. As I'll show you in a minute, they're not an invader, but they do play a role. Sheba and Dedan and Saudi Arabia circled, and Put or Libya circled. And you may wonder how we're so sure that Persia is Iran, Rosh is Russia, Put is Libya, Sheba and Dedan is Saudi Arabia. I would draw your attention to my book, The Middle East Meltdown, which will give you the documentation on all of that. Too much information to go into here on a brief podcast and a brief prophecy update. But the data is there at your fingertips. You know, should you need some validation on this point. So clearly one of the invaders is Russia, and clearly one of the invaders is Iran. Now, what's so interesting is not just that those nations, with their hostility to Israel, are in place today, those two nations, but they're perpetually cooperating with each other. So what you have to look at is not just the nations coming into existence with a hostile ambition against Israel, but the perpetual cooperation between the two. So with that being said, notice this article from Memory TV. This is dated May the 7th, 2025. Memory stands for Middle East Media Research Institute. And I love this website because it takes the speeches given by Muslims, for example, in Arabic, and just translates them for the world to see. I mean, they say one thing when they're talking to us in the West, and something completely different when they're talking to their own people. And in times past, we couldn't really understand what they were saying to their own people because we didn't have the Arabic translations. Well, now we have it, and it's available instantaneously via the internet, social media, etc. And that's why Memory is such a valuable resource to analyze these things in these last days. But the article says the Iranian ambassador to Russia said this: Russia and Iran relations have surpassed mere neighborly ties. Russia has aligned with our position on regional, international, and bilateral issues. So the Iranian ambassador is telling the world that we're in bed with Russia. Here's what the article says. Iranian ambassador to Russia discussed the relationship between the two countries on a May the 7th, 2025 broadcast on Iran TV. He stated that the ties between Russia and Iran have moved beyond neighborly relations, noting that the two relations share aligned positions on regional, international, and even bilateral matters. Here's what the Iranian ambassador said, quote, "The treaty is as clear from its name is a comprehensive agreement which includes all aspects of our relations: policy, economy, culture, military, defense, security, tourism, education, the environment, IT, and ICT. Today, we and Russia have reached the next level." Is that not what Ezekiel in chapters 38 and 39 predicted would happen 2,600 years ago? And here it is in our time period, moving very, very aggressively into these two nations, into prophetic orbit and the right prophetic alliance. Now, a lot of people have told me we're a long way away from the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39 because North Africa, that Ezekiel also mentions, is not in place. And in the map that we gave to you a little bit earlier, we made reference to Russia and also Put, which is modern day Libya. And people say, well, there's no real, relationship between Russia and Libya. So we're a long way away from the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38 and 39. But I would just beg you to think again. It's almost like the final piece of the puzzle that's now falling into place is Libya or North Africa. I hope I didn't say North America earlier. I meant North Africa, Russia and North Africa. So with all of that being said, notice this particular article from China.org.cn, and it is a April 29th, 2025 article, and it says Libya's Western-based Presidency Council stresses strengthening partnership with Russia. It says this: Deputy President of the Libyan Presidency Council stressed here on Monday the importance of, look at this sentence, strengthening the partnership with Russia to support Libya's political process led by the Presidency Council. It goes on and it says this individual made his remarks during a meeting with a Russian delegation headed by Alexander, I think you pronounce that, Kinshake, Director of Middle East and Director of the Middle East and North Africa Department at the Russian Foreign Ministry, according to a statement by the Presidency Council. So here's the announcement that, you know what, not only is Russia in the deepest alliance it's ever had with Iran, but the exact same thing is happening with Libya, Russia's alliance with Libya, or PUT. What's fascinating to watch is not just these countries coming into existence with a hostile intention towards Israel, but the alliances between these countries are being built constantly. Here is an article from the Observer, Libya Observer, and it says virtually the same thing. This is dated April 28th, 2025. It says the acting Minister of Foreign Affairs in the Government of National Unity received a high-level delegation from the Russian Foreign Ministry on Monday at the ministry's headquarters in Tripoli, in the presence of the Russian ambassador to Libya, and it mentions his name here. According to a statement posted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on its Facebook page, this particular person from Libya discussed with the Russian delegation ways to strengthen the bilateral relations between the two countries across the various fields in a manner that serves mutual interests and enhances the existing cooperation between Tripoli, that's Libya, and Moscow, that's Russia. So it's not just Russia and Tehran in bed together. It's Russia or Moscow and Tripoli of Libya in bed together. And all of the alliances that Ezekiel implied would come into existence at the time of the end are coming into existence with tremendous speed, coming into existence with tremendous aggression. Now let's throw into the mix, if we could, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is Sheba and Dedan. And notice, if you will, Ezekiel chapter 38, and notice, if you will, verse 13. It says, Sheba and Dedan, that's Saudi Arabia, and the merchants of Tarshish, that would be Spain, with all its villages will say to you, who's the you? The invaders that are coming from Russia, Iran, Turkey, Libya, etc. What is Saudi Arabia going to say when this invasion takes place? They will say to you, have you come to capture spoil? Have you assembled your company to seize plunder, to carry away silver and gold, and to take away cattle and goods, and to capture great spoil? Close quote. In other words, when this invasion happens, the Saudis aren't going to like it. And they're going to stage what many have described as sort of a lame protest. They'll speak up against the invasion, Ezekiel said 2,600 years ago, but they're really not going to do anything to stop it. And so the question is, why would an Islamic country, I believe it's a Sunni Islamic country, Saudi Arabia, why in the world would they not cooperate with everyone else in this invasion? And we really didn't have much of an explanation for that until the Abraham Accords, which are really not peace agreements, they're normalization agreements. If these nations, Islamic nations, will simply acknowledge Israel's right to exist, has a place on the map. Most Islamic maps don't even acknowledge Israel. Then Israel, in exchange for that, promises to open up the 4 T's to the said Islamic nation that will acknowledge Israel's right to exist, which include trade, travel, tourism, and technology. And everything that we've been reading and everything that the analysts are saying indicates that the Saudis are on the precipice of entering into, particularly under the pressure of the Trump administration, one of these, what we would call Abraham Accords. And so that's what Ezekiel 38 and verse 13 is speaking of. That's then becomes a potential explanation why the Saudis will speak up and will not like the invasion, because they're economically benefiting from Israel, because they've normalized relations with Israel under the auspices of the Abraham Accords. And so with all of that being said, that's why this particular article from jns.org is so fascinating. It's from one of the leaders there, Smotrich, if I'm pronouncing his name right, in Israel, saying this: Israel will not commit suicide for ties with Riyadh. Now, Riyadh, of course, is Saudi Arabia. If the Saudis want peace for peace with a maximized win-win for everyone, we're happy about that, said the Israeli finance minister. And this is an article dated May the 13th, 2025. Now, here are the Israelis saying to the Saudis, we want to normalize relationships with you, but quit demanding that we do so under the condition of a Palestinian state, which would take Israel's width and reduce it to less than 10 miles and put Israel in a militarily defensible position. A Palestinian state is like building a massive terrorist cell within your own country. I mean, if it didn't work so well with Gaza in the southwestern portion of the map, how in the world are the Israelis supposed to tolerate giving up the so-called West Bank, Judea and Samaria to the so-called Palestinians? Just as they use Gaza as a beachhead to attack Israel, they'll use the so-called West Bank for the same reason. And the Israelis are saying here, we want normalization with you, Saudis, but don't keep demanding a Palestinian state as a condition for those normalized relations. The article says Israeli-Saudi normalization will only happen through the peace for peace formula and not by establishing a Palestinian terror state. Israeli finance minister Smotrich, if I'm pronouncing his name right, reiterated on Monday, quote, "We think normalization is a good thing and in our mutual interests, both for us and the Saudis, mainly the Saudis," Smotrich told JNS during the weekly faction meeting of his religious Zionism party in Jerusalem. The article goes on and says Israel will not even think for a second about giving in to the Saudi demands for a pathway to a Palestinian state, the finance minister emphasized, telling JNS, quote, "That will never happen, no way," close quote. A Palestinian state in Judea and Samaria would be a, quote, "huge terrorist state, Gaza, but multiplied by 20. And in an area that geographically and topographically dominates the entire state of Israel," Smotrich said. If the Saudis want peace for peace with a maximized win-win for everyone, we're happy about that. If they're asking for us to commit suicide in the process, then no thanks, he said. Now enter the picture one Donald Trump, who at the time of this recording is in those Gulf states, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia right next door, and he's entering into all these sorts of deals with them. The Trump administration has been criticized for accepting a plane, an airplane, to the American government from the Qatar government. What I think is happening is Trump is over there kind of smoothing the path between those states, which will eventually include Saudi Arabia, and the Israelis. He's sort of playing this role of getting the two together. And I'm not here to make a political statement about it, whether it's good or bad, one way or the other. This is a prophecy update. And so what I'm simply saying is Trump's presence over in that part of the world now, as we are recording this, is indicative of the fact that the groundwork is being laid to bring the Saudis closer to Israel, normalize relations between the two, and that will be a major stage setter. That's what's coming, a major stage setter for the fulfillment of the specifics of Ezekiel 38 and 39, specifically verse 13, Sheba and Dedan, Saudi Arabia, staging this lame protest. In other words, you're seeing the table set very aggressively right now for the fulfillment of Ezekiel 38, verse 13. And the reason I bring up Donald Trump is this article that I'm reading from brings him up as well. It says, U.S. President Donald Trump was scheduled to depart for the Middle East on Monday with scheduled visits to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, also Qatar, right next door, Abu Dhabi, which is in the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. And listen to what Trump said. Trump on May 6 hinted at a major announcement coming ahead of the regional tour. The surprise announcement, which he called, quote, as big as it gets, close quote, would be made later before his Monday departure, Trump said. It's really positive, he stressed, though declining to specify the topic. Quoting more from Trump, it says, it will be one of the most important announcements that have been made in many years about a certain subject, a very important subject, close quote. Last month, Trump said that the Saudis could join the 4 Arab nations that signed the Arab Accords with Jerusalem during his first term. Quote, quoting Trump, I think Saudi Arabia will go into the Abraham Accords. We had 4 countries in there. It was all set. We would have had it packed. Now we're going to start it again. Close quote, he stated, referring to the 2020 deal. So interesting times that we're living in. In fact, related to Trump's visit to that part of the world, notice this particular screenshot from X. This was put out by a group called Rapid Response. And notice what Trump said in a speech earlier this week. He said, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders who spent trillions of dollars failing to develop Kabul and Baghdad. The birth of the modern Middle East has been brought about by people of the region themselves. And look at all of these glowing statements and phrases he is giving to nations right next door to Saudi Arabia. And I think what Trump is doing is he is bringing the Israelis and the Saudis together. I think these normalization agreements between Israel and the Saudis are coming into existence. Trump is just trying to, get the Saudis on board that we can't have this as long as you keep demanding this Palestinian state. So the Saudis and the Israelis via Trump are coming together, and I find that prophetically significant, albeit Ezekiel 38 verse 13. Along with all of these other issues that we've talked about here, the alignment between Russia and Iran, the alignment between Russia and Libya, etc. Folks, it's all coming together so quick. It's all coming together so fast. The tribulation period is rapidly approaching us. And if that's the case, then the rapture of the church can't be far away. We're really living in some unique messianic and prophetic times. With all of that being said, let's jump to our third category that we're going to cover in this session, and this has to do with anti-Semitism. Notice this graphic from Revelation chapter 12, verses 6 through 17, which prophetically anticipates Satan losing permanent access to heaven midway through the tribulation period. Apparently, Satan can go into heaven even as we speak. He doesn't do it to worship and serve as he once did as a high-ranking angel, but he does it to communicate and accuse. And Bible prophecy, it's right out of Revelation 12, verses 6 through 17, indicates that midway through the tribulation period, that privilege is going to be taken away from Satan and he'll plummet to the earth. And he's going to try to gobble up the woman clothed with the sun and the moon and the 12 stars, which is not the Virgin Mary there. It's not the church, because that woman is pregnant with Jesus. The church did not give birth to Jesus. Jesus gave birth to the church. But the nation of Israel did, in fact, give birth genealogically to Jesus Christ. And Satan will understand that from that point on, he's got to destroy Israel. He's got a short time, 3.5 years left, to gobble up Israel so that the kingdom can't come to the earth, because Bible prophecy indicates that not only would Jesus come to the earth in his first coming through Israel, not only would the scripture come to us through Israel, but so would the kingdom, which will be headquartered in Jerusalem. And this passage is fantastic in the sense that it explains the satanic hatred. It talks about Satan's wrath there. The Greek word orge is used. His total passionate hostility and hatred towards the Jewish nation and the Jewish people in the second half of the tribulation period. Now that prophecy, among many others, is one of the many that we can point to indicating that anti-Semitism, the irrational hatred of the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the irrational hatred of Israel will accelerate as we get closer to the end of the age. I mean, Israel, as you look at her on a map, is about the size of New Jersey. She's a tiny nation fighting for her very existence. By the way, May the 14th, earlier this week, we celebrated Israel, modern day Israel's, I believe, 77th, if I've got my math right. 77th, and I may have my math wrong, but Israel's 77th birthday. The modern state of Israel, 1948 up to 2025, has been in existence for 77 years. The miracle on the Mediterranean. A tiny nation fighting for her very existence in a sea of Islamic theocratic dictatorships whose very charters demand that she be pushed into the Mediterranean Sea. I mean, that's an outworking, that irrational hatred for Israel, this tiny nation, yet she's blamed in many circles, even in Christian circles, for most of the world's problems. That whole scenario is an outworking of what Bible prophecy anticipates for the end of the age. Jew hatred will accelerate as we get closer to the end of the age. Now, what's interesting about this hatred is we used to just hear it from the left, from Ilhan Omar, from Rashida Tlaib, from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a group of leftist Jew haters that Trump affectionately dubbed the Squad. You know, we used to hear this kind of stuff, Jew hatred, from the Reverend Jeremiah Wright and people like that. Well, what's interesting about our most immediate time period is now we're hearing Jew hatred coming from the right. Names like Tucker Carlson are platforming anti-Semitic teaching regularly. Names like Candace Owens preaching and platforming the same thing. And here's a name, Stu Peters. During the lockdown, he was a guy that I agreed with on a lot of limited government issues, but he has come out as a very, very clear anti-Semite. And so to help us with this, notice this article from JTA.org, May the 7th, 2025, and it deals with a student who posted a sign reading "blank the Jews," and how he doubled down with the encouragement on the platform of an anti-Semitic influencer named Stu Peters. The student that posted this, his name is Mo Khan, said he was the real victim amid an outcry over the anti-Semitic sign. So he posted this sign. I believe he did this in college. blank the Jews, and people kind of came down on him for it, and he kind of backtracked a little bit, but then he came under the influence of this podcaster named Stu Peters, a supposed conservative, who pushed him back over the edge into anti-Semitism and got him to sort of agree that what he did was right. And if there's any victim here, it's not the Jews, it's the guy that posted the anti-Semitic slur. So at any rate, the article says, shortly after writing, "I abhor hate in all forms," the student posted a video of a sign reading "blank the Jews." He sat down for an interview with an anti-Semitic influencer and endorsed the idea of Jewish supremacy. Jewish supremacy means the Jews are behind all of the problems in the world. It's a mentality that goes back to the learned elders of the Protocols of Zion. A plagiarized and anti-Semitic piece of trash published around 1902 that indicated that the Jews are behind every problem in the world, because after all, the Jews, the Rothschilds, control the banks and they control media. So anything that's wrong in the world, you blame it on the Jews. That's the direction that Stu Peters and his contemporaries and colleagues have moved into. Anyway, the article says Mo Kahan, who took to video on Saturday night in a bar owned by Barstool Sports, has shifted over the past few days from expressing contrition to seemingly embracing anti-Semitic rhetoric. Barstool owner Dave Portnoy, who is Jewish, said in a series of videos that he offered to pay Kahn to travel to Auschwitz, only to withdraw the offer when Kahn admitted he had done nothing wrong. So he came under the influence for a while, this guy Kahn, who posted this signage, came under the influence of this gentleman by the name of Portnoy, who is Jewish, who sort of talked the young student off the ledge and got him to admit that what he posted was wrong, was even getting him to go to Auschwitz to sort of develop his sensitivities that there really are satanic and human conspiracies against the Jews. And it looked like things were moving in the right direction, and then all of a sudden Stu Peters enters the picture and pushes this student the opposite direction and pushes him back into anti-Semitism. Kahn joined Stu Peters, an anti-Semitic podcaster, for an interview. Peters, who frequently laces his monologues with blatant attacks on the Jewish community, has called for American Jews to be expelled in a final solution. Appearing to refer to Portnoy, Peters said during the interview to this student, "You're an innocent man. But over the past few days, this disgusting Jew has internationally destroyed your reputation." He asked Kahn whether his ordeal is evidence of Jewish supremacy. To an extent, Kahn said, I believe that it is because I believe that it is just because it goes to show how much control one group can have on anyone's potential career. Kahn added, if that doesn't show you some kind of supremacy in state, and that's there, then I really don't know what else counts as supremacy. The article says Kahn was suspended from Temple University as a result of the incident and fired from a job, according to his fundraiser page. On the page, he defended his actions, writing that, quote, "That sign didn't kill any Jews, nor did my reporting of it, but their support for Israel kills 1,000 people every single day," Kahn continued. So he's obviously bought into a perverted analysis, a Hamas perverted interpretation of what's happening in the Middle East, as Israel is legitimately trying to push Hamas out of Gaza. So as Israel is doing this, they're taking the Hamas statistics and the statistics from the UN, indicating that Israel is somehow doing something illegal in so doing, and Israel is after all, the oppressor. The article continues and it says, Portnoy and the greater Jewish community are making themselves out to be some kind of victims because of hurt feelings with 3 words on a bar sign, but I'm the real victim. That's a quote from Khan. Peters also asked Khan whether it was time for humanity to join forces and become absolutely tribal against Jewish supremacy, to which Khan responded, absolutely, and especially in this case. Peters then replied, these Jews are blanking everyone. It is humanity against the synagogue of Satan. It is humanity against these Jews. We have to find a final solution. Obviously quoting there the final solution given by the diabolical and notorious Adolf Hitler. This is just an example of more anti-Semitism, not coming from the left in this case, but coming from the right. Now, here is an article from the Jerusalem Post. This is dated April 27th, 2025, and it deals with Swiss fencers turn backs on gold-winning Israeli team in medal ceremony. The article says this, the Swiss under-23 fencing team turned its back on Israeli competitors during the medal ceremony of the European Fencing Championship in Estonia on Saturday night. Israel's male under-23 team won the gold medal, with the Swiss team winning the silver and the Italian team winning the bronze. After the 3 teams took to the podium to take their awards, the Swiss fencers turned their back on Israel while Israel's national anthem was being played. Israel Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar congratulated his team but criticized the Swiss team for disrespectful behavior. Now, when you sort of follow this story, when this came out in the press, when it came out nationally, internationally, etc., the Swiss group had every excuse that you could find as to why this was not an anti-Semitic type of thing. I'm not sure they have ever issued an apology. What they're claiming is they were grossly misunderstood. Which, you know, I'm always interested in giving people the benefit of the doubt, unless it's a pattern. See, this is part of a pattern that's been going on for a long time. So that leads me to the conclusion that this Swiss team was doing something intentionally anti-Semitic, and it's not just some kind of international misunderstanding. And the article explains this. It talks about how the Iraqi team protested in May 2023. It says, this is not the first time a competing team has protested Israel during a fencing competition. In May of 2023, Iraq's national fencing team withdrew from the World's Fencing Championship in Istanbul after being pitted against the Israeli team. Quote, the Iraqi national team withdrew from the individual races in the World Cup Fencing Championship, which is taking place in Istanbul and qualifies for the Paris Olympics, after the lottery pitted it against the team of the occupying Israeli entity, said the Iraqi Fencing Federation. So when Iraq did this in 2023, they did this because they think Israel is an occupying power, meaning Israel is on somebody else's land. So they bought into the whole Palestinian narrative. I do not believe Israel is doing anything illegal, and she's not occupying anything, because you can't occupy what you own. It's like me sitting in the living room of my house and someone accuses me of being an illegal occupier. Well, no, I'm not an illegal occupier because I own the house. Israel, based on the San Remo Accords, post-World War I, based on the 1947 post-World War II UN partition, and this has been demonstrated over and over again, legally owns that land. Not only that, the Bible says they own that land via the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis 15 verses 18 through 21. But if you buy into the fact that Israel is doing something illegal, illegally occupying someone else's land, then why not turn your back to them when they win a fencing championship? As the Swiss did, why not do what the Iraqis did? We're not going to schedule competition against the Israelis because they're illegal occupiers. I mean, this is all on our headlines, these little incidents that occur. The outworking of the anti-Semitism that is supposed to accelerate in the last days. Israel is always treated with a different set of gloves and by a different standard. You may have followed in the news very recently what happened at Columbia University, one of our leading Ivy League schools. This is something that comes from X, and it says, breaking: masked terror supporters have taken over the Columbia Library while students are trying to study for finals. Columbia proves once again that they prioritize complete chaos over an education. And it's not just chaos, it's dogma, which is anti-Israeli and believes that Israel is unjustly killing a bunch of people as they root out terrorism and Hamas from Gaza, and Israel is doing something illegal through illegal occupation. So here come these protesters causing chaos in a library, etc., as students are trying to prepare for final exams. I mean, this is the state now of our leading educational institutions in our country. And just to show you how this is coming from the left and it's coming from the right, we have a fast, under a minute video that we want to play for you. It's entitled "Christ is King, Antisemitism." It's what some conservative activists recently said on a podcast, and or a conservative activist said on a podcast. And let's play that for you at this time, if we could.
Christ is King. Why is that labeled anti-Semitic?
Because it is.
Yeah, it goes totally against their religion.
If you say Christ is King, what's their job? How are they the chosen?
Right, yeah, right.
It is anti-Semitic. Christ was anti-Semitic. He said, "You're the synagogue of Satan. Get out of here, you brood of vipers."
Yeah, that's actually a verse in the Bible.
You're the children of the devil. Yeah. I don't understand how evangelical Christians read this and are like, they're our friends.
Yeah, they always say they're God's chosen people.
Yeah.
I always hear that from Republicans.
And then who are you?
Right.
Who are you worshiping?
Mm-hmm.
So that becomes a stunning thing, doesn't it? Let me make sure I've got the hand signal there from my crew. They usually give me a thumbs up to make sure I'm in good shape. I saw a hand there. There we go. Just want to make sure I'm not talking while the microphone is off. That's a stunning thing. You notice that she talks about Christ is King, which is a moniker for amillennialism. It's the same moniker that Candace Owens puts up every time she goes on a tirade against the Jews. She has a moniker that says Christ is King. It's a moniker for replacement theology. Jesus is ruling as king now, and because he's ruling as king now, there's not going to be a future kingdom involving the elevation of the nation of Israel then in faith during the kingdom age. You'll notice that they keep using this expression, synagogue of Satan. That comes from Revelation 2, I think it's around verse 9, chapter 3, about verse 9, where two of the churches there in the Asia Minor area were being persecuted by unbelieving Jews, and Jesus, in those two epistles, calls the persecutors of his church the synagogue of Satan. So when someone uses the synagogue of Satan to indiscriminately apply it to the whole nation of Israel, that's an abuse of the passage. What that is dealing with is unbelieving Jews persecuting the church. And until that happens, you can't use that expression, the synagogue of Satan. If you want to know what God's attitude is towards unbelieving Israel, it's found in Romans chapter 11, I believe it is, verse 28, where Paul the Apostle says concerning the Jews to the church at Rome, right now they are your enemies because they're opposing the gospel and they're opposing your work in the church at Rome. They're persecuting you. But for the sake of the fathers, now who are the fathers? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the ones that God gave the Abrahamic covenant to Abraham, and it was passed down to Isaac and to Jacob. For the sake of the fathers, they are beloved. So be very, very careful how you're using this synagogue of Satan rhetoric, because that has a specific context of unbelieving Jews persecuting Christianity. And even when that happens, God says through Paul in Romans 11, verse 28, that the Jewish people, even in that state, are still beloved, even though they're your enemies on behalf of the Abrahamic covenant. The Romans 11, verse 28 is almost not in the Bibles of these anti-Semites who are using the Bible very, very selectively. And notice that she says here, Jesus was an anti-Semite. Folks, Jesus was not an anti-Semite. Jesus came into the world through the Jewish nation. Here's a graphic of a genealogy in Matthew chapter 1 that links Jesus back to David. If we can put that graphic up, and it links David back to Abraham. So Jesus was about as Jewish as could be. He was not anti-Semitic. If he was anti-Semitic, that means he hated himself because he himself was Jewish. And to prove that Jesus was not anti-Semitic, at the prospect of Jerusalem burning, because he knew that they were going to reject the offer of the king and the kingdom, and there would be consequences for that according to the nation's covenantal structure. When Jesus saw that prophetically on Palm Sunday, he did not celebrate the future burning of Jerusalem. He wept over it. Why would an anti-Semite do that? An anti-Semite wouldn't weep over the prospect of Jerusalem burning. She would celebrate it. So notice what happened with Jesus in Luke 19, verses 41 through 44, as he rode into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. It says, when he approached Jerusalem, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, if you had known this day, even you, the things which make for peace, but now they have been hidden from your eyes, for the days will come upon you when your enemies will throw up a barricade against you and surround you and hem you in on every side. This is speaking of what Titus of Rome would do to the city of Jerusalem in the horrific events of AD 70. They will level you to the ground and your children within you. They will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you do not recognize the time of your visitation. If Jesus was anti-Semitic, the way this individual just said, why in the world is he weeping over the prospect of Jerusalem burning? It seems to me he'd be celebrating it. So there's a lot of hijacking going on right now, not from the left. I mean, we expect all this stuff from the left, but from the right, from the limited government people, from some, I'm embarrassed to say, MAGA supporters. And they're using the Bible very selectively, just like the left does, to make it sound like Israel is just always a synagogue of Satan. And Jesus himself was anti-Semitic. And let's cut Israel out of the equation entirely because Jesus is ruling as king now in what is called replacement theology or supersessionism. And the fact that these things are accelerating is a sign of the times, and that's why I bring these things to your attention in a prophecy update. However, I do, as we get ready to close here, one piece of good news. Here's a screenshot from JNS, and it says this: Arkansas becomes the first state to ban agencies from saying West Bank. And if you read the fine print here, it says, it is the intent of the General Assembly to refer to land controlled by Israel from Jordan during the 1967 Six-Day War by its historical name, Judea and Samaria, the bill says. This is, in my view, a wonderful development. We can thank Sarah Huckabee and others in Arkansas for promoting this. Her father in the administration promotes the same kind of thing. There was something introduced by Tom Cotton in our legislative branch that seeks to change all of the United States formal documents that might refer to the West Bank. Forget that language. We're going to change it to Judea and Samaria. I believe Trump issued an executive order to that effect. I know that Mike Huckabee supports that. And here is his daughter, Sarah Huckabee, in Arkansas, coming from a Christian, Judeo-Christian background. Remember, Mike Huckabee, I believe, was a Baptist minister wanting to go back to biblical vernacular when describing what used to be called the West Bank. The West Bank is a politically loaded term because that area is not west of Israel. It's east of Israel, and it's west of Jordan. So when you use the expression West Bank, you're using a politically loaded term that takes the Jordanian side of the conflict over there. And by the way, the Bible never uses the word West Bank. It uses the expression Judea and Samaria. So any type of movement within the United States to go back to the original biblical language and not politically loaded anti-Semitic terms, to me, is a big plus. And so with all of this talk about anti-Semitism, there's actually some good news in the midst of it. So that's our prophecy update for today. We talked, putting up our review slide, about issues related to the temple, the tightening of the alliances in the Gog-Magog scenario, and some things that are happening related to anti-Semitism. For the sake of time, we're just going to go ahead and close at this particular point. But first, I want to bring to you a fresh announcement about our 5th annual prophecy conference that is going to be held in 2026, February 20th and 21st. This is the first time we've announced this. I want to draw your attention to a website. Our prophecy conference here, annual prophecy conference at Sugarland Bible Church, has become such a big deal that we now have it all connected and controlled through another website, a domain name that we purchased. It's www.profcon.com. And please go to that website because you're going to see a very professional display of what we are planning for our 5th annual prophecy conference in 2026 on February 20th and 21st. It is going to be a big deal. The focus of it will be last days discernment, something that we desperately need. Wonderful contemporary music is going to be performed by one of our homegrown groups, Olam Worship. They were with us in our last conference in February of 2025, and we got such good reviews on them that we've invited them back for 2026. The conference now is going to be expanded into Friday and Saturday. And we don't want to say no to people. When we had it here at the church, we had to turn people away because space filled up. So what we've done is we have rented the Sugarland Marriott, a major ballroom where our meal banquet will take place there. The banquet and the conference aren't going to be at different locations anymore. The whole thing is going to be at the Sugarland Marriott. The banquet will be there, and the conference has been expanded to give us an opportunity to hear more speakers and to give these speakers more time to communicate. And so it's going to go all day Friday. It's going to go all day Saturday. And then if you want to stick around on Sunday, come back over here to Sugarland Bible Church, where many of our speakers are going to be presenting during our normal service times here at Sugarland Bible Church. And the theme of the conference is Last Days Discernment. And here are our speakers. Olivier Melnick will be back, dealing with anti-Semitism. Russ Miller will be back. He was with us a year or two ago, dealing with the whole creationism issue. We have Paul Wilkinson coming, who's a wonderful speaker, pro-Israel, deals with a lot of heresies in the church related to Christian Palestinianism. Patrick Wood is going to be one of the speakers and presenters. He's one of the great experts in the world concerning the whole infrastructure of the Mark of the Beast system that is now being erected. I'm going to be one of the speakers, and we need you to go and sign up. I believe registration is live now on that particular website, www.profcon.com. And so I hope you go and you register and you come out to Sugarland and enjoy that conference. And lo and behold, as I was going through these different speakers, I left out somebody, which I shouldn't have done, because he's one of the greats. Accompanying these other speakers will be Alex Newman, who's one of the great minds today on the inroad of the New World Order and our loss of sovereignty as Americans as the New World Order gains strength. So that's a real fast summation of what's coming February 20th and 21st at our 5th annual ProfCon. I'll keep emphasizing that throughout these various podcasts that we do. But at any rate, that's the end of our prophecy update for today. We look forward to our next Pastor's Point of View together. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting Pastor's Point of View. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.